Okay. This paper is based on my postdoctoral work in Haifa University, Herzl Institute, in the project From Rebirth to the Skies. The research included documenting Aircrew members, Holocaust survivors, who began sharing their memories during and following the Holocaust in their late 70s and 80s. I interviewed 35 aircrew members who were born between 1927 and 1948, and they came from different countries of Europe, from the West and East Europe. They experienced the horrors of the Holocaust as children. After the war, these individuals faced with many challenges, including difficult being absorbed into society in their new country. All of them volunteered to the Air Force and served during the 50s and the 60s. Many members of this group, which is a part of the legacy of the IAF, Israeli Air Force, and the State of Israel, link their decision to be pilots to their experience in the Holocaust. In the mid-50s, the approximately 300 aircrew members served at key points of decision-making within the Israeli Air Force, included 136 Holocaust survivors. In addition, of the 285 aircrew members who took part in the 1956 Sinai War, 33% were Holocaust survivors. During their service in the IAF, most of them remained silent about their experience during the Holocaust. For example, I kept my personal story close to my chest, like cards. I did not share it with anyone. It's known that I am not the only one who kept quiet. This entire amazing group kept quiet, some more than others. If everyone felt foreign to the Israeli way of life, and everyone made a great effort to forget the past, to be like their friends, and to blend into Israeliness. Some succeeded and some failed. Shaya Harsit. In the early decade after statehood, pilots considered model of Zionist Sabra heroism. The image was reinforced after the 1956 war. This was the first war in which jet planes participated, and the Air Force played a crucial role in the war. Against the background of a short stage of manpower in late 50s, Ezer Weizmann, Air Force commander at the time and later President of Israel, coined the phrase "to bet the best to the skies." Only 50 years later, we know that 1/3 of the best of the skies, the best go to the skies, were Holocaust survivors. To understand their transformation from exilic children and Holocaust refugees, the antithesis of the image of Sabra fighter into members of the leading elite in the Air Force and the State of Israel, I analyzed the major themes that emerged in the memories they shared during their interviews in historical, social, and cultural context. This analysis is based on the testimonies and the Israeli national story. Both reflect the Holocaust and the personal and national rebirth of each of the interviewees. Like a jigsaw puzzle, the different stories produce the whole that constitutes a complex account of the phenomenon. The methodological discussion considers a number of questions. What was the fate of these children during and following the Holocaust? How did their faith during the Holocaust influence their desire to enlist specifically in the Air Force and their motivation to volunteer for pilot training? What were the factors that contribute to their integration and success in the IAF and in the Israeli society? Testimony taken directly from survivor raises the question of reliability of memories conveyed decades after the event themselves. This study is not aimed to researching the historical truth. Rather, it is an effort to focus on the memories and views of the survivors. The interviews were accompanied by fears regarding the opening up of age-old wounds and the concern that perhaps it would be better to leave the past in the past. Other challenges resulted from my desire to preserve the uniqueness of each story while at the same time creating a common narrative. For this reason, I decided to present the life stories through a discussion based on the main contact question that were asked in the interview and to both characterize the main themes and highlight the themes that are expansional. The study presents the first documentary research regarding a group as this group, whose members share a common denominator, their identity and experiences children who survived the Holocaust and subsequently become IAF Aircrew members. It is always increases awareness regarding the gap between their difficult pasts, both as children during the Holocaust and new immigrants in Israel, and their contribution to the Air Force. This helps us better understand the socio-historical process that shaped the face of the country. In addition, it enlarged our knowledge regarding the IAF during its establishment and present it as a warm home that cultivated equal opportunity, ideology, and a sense of purpose and mission even among those who had difficult experience as children. However, because the enlistment of Holocaust survivors into other branches of the Israeli military has not yet been sufficiently researched, this study does not attempt to engage in a comparative study. My contribution in this paper is on the subject in general, and the use of Holocaust testimony in particular. So what memories emerge in those life stories? About the pre-war period. Despite their young ages and the paucity of pre-war memories, several themes recur in the interviews. The economic situation, education, connection to religion and tradition, connection to Zionism, relations with non-Jewish neighbors, and relations with their parents. Only one example about the economic situation. GBN, its acronym of his name, of Warsaw, Poland, spoke about a memory that he remembers especially. The strongest memory I have of home is a birthday party that they celebrated for me when I was 2 or 3 years old. I received a tricycle. Such war memories are very traumatic and formative. Whatever they survived on their own and maybe with their family. First war experience, for example, the Germans came to my grandfather's house and beat my grandfather. I will never forget that picture of my grandfather laying on the wooden floor in a puddle of blood mixed with jam. Other difficulties like separation from family and parents. They remember father as a leader. The challenges of survival, fear, hunger, cold, hiding places, sense of persecution. They remember efforts to live normal life during the Holocaust. The Holocaust experience were diverse due to the fact that the interviewees lived in different countries under Nazi occupation, and their experience was a function of Nazi policy in each country. For example, my uncle was caught. I did not see how they killed him. I became an animal whose sole aim was to survive. and there was nothing that I was not willing to do. I was a 6-year-old boy, like an animal, stole, pimped, looted, lied, whatever. The mother was a significant figure who saved life and was extraordinarily brave. I must give more examples for the mothers. I remember arriving in Auschwitz. They took us to the shower. They shaved our heads. This is the only situation that is branded in my memory that I would never forever forget. That is the moment. Heads shone with clothes. They left me my shoes. Those were the shoes that my mother had bought for me for a kilogram of rice. The most difficult thing was the shame and the humiliation. I will never forget that moment. Another example for the mother. My mother was a hero. She decided to give me away to save me. My aunt was a hero. These two women, my mother and my aunt, saved their children. My mother was a strong, wise woman, yet she did not survive. Making the decision to give me away was an act of heroism. After the war, this is a period of continuous challenging, coping with the post-war reality, facing their loss, loneliness, and emptiness. Liberation is a significant memory and the period of wandering until they immigrated to Israel. The different setting in which they were placed affected the choices they made. Here I come to the Appeldoorn, to Salvino, to Lena Kichler, etc. They describe the effect on their identity of the youth movement and Zionist ideology, what we heard before, that they encountered immediately after the war, and how they helped them cope with their Holocaust trauma. Despite the difficulties, the interviewees have a positive, vivid memory about the sights, tastes, and smells of this period. Those who survived with their parents remember their parents' behavior and responses to the discovery of their terrible losses caused by the war and the difficulties of coping with the new reality. On the one hand, liberation, and on the other, enormous grief over the loss, loneliness, being uprooted and homeless, and the knowledge that they have no home to return to. Sometimes these children were forced to part from their parents again when they arrived to Israel. Those who survived without their parents found themselves completely alone and tried to fit into their new environment. Aliyah, immigrating to Israel. Immigrating to Israel included many difficulties such as new language, loneliness, problem adjusting to various new setting. The emotion tool of integration into Israeli society included adopting a new identity and starting a new life. I registered for the first grade and they called me the refugee. The kids did not accept me. I did not know the language. I did not fit in and no one helped me. I remember that I was always home alone with no friends, without anything. My whole youth I never wanted to remember the Holocaust. On the contrary, I wanted to forget it. I joined to the Tel Aviv Scouts. The Aviation Club became my home. I fit in very well after Gadna. I went to the Aviation Club. We would go to Sde Dov airfield every Saturday. Factors that facilitated integration. Kibbutzim and Air Force. Life in the kibbutz was a foundational experience that had a major contribution to their integration and success in the Air Force. Life on a kibbutz made it possible for them to become similar to Sabra and fit in. On the kibbutz, they had the opportunity to shade the marks of the diaspora, and life on the kibbutz strengthened their ties to Israel. Air Force, motivating why they volunteered. Their Holocaust experience was influential in their decision to volunteer. Changing from a humiliated child in the Holocaust to a child who belongs to the top of the elite of the State of Israel. Maybe a brigadier general in the Air Force will grow out of the shame and humiliation of Auschwitz. If I manage to go from a yellow Star of David on my chest to a blue Star of David on my wings, then what more does a person need? The desire to make a contribution and make a dream come true. Aviation Club and Air Gadna activities, youth movement, and also a way to integrate into Sabra society. For example, when I was in the flight school in the Air Force, I was already like everyone else. I was considered and judged according to my performance. Another motivation, living close to an Air Force base, source of pride for their parents, joined without a specific plan, intention, also some of them. They all shared a desire to protect the state and to make a contribution. I found mutual relations between personal rebirths and the Air Force, from rebirths to the skies. We can find appreciation and gratitude to the Air Force for its role in their personal revival, such as during my 22 years of service in the Air Force, I served the country loyally with devotion, and at the same time I know that the country and the Air Force gave me such more than I gave them. Another example, you can find complete identification between men and Air Force, which was expressed in phrases like, the Air Force is me and I am the Air Force. So the Air Force became their home and source for conciliation for what they had lost in their childhood in the Holocaust, which increased their desire to contribute even more. The Air Force was a home and family for me. Service in the Air Force shaped my new identity and marked a sharp transition from a passive victim to an active man in the Air Force. From my point of view in the Holocaust, I was led everywhere. Here, I feel as if I did something. All my life, I stayed in the Air Force because I wanted things. It was a passion. I wanted to be a fighter pilot in the war. Summary and conclusions. This study exposed the myth that the Air Force officers who served in the 50s and in the 60s, the best to the skies, were Israeli-born Sabra. Although they came from over there and survived the horrors of the Holocaust, they also completely identified with their mission as airmen and had the same passion for the Air Force and sense of mission as their Israeli-born counterparts. They so strongly identified with the Air Force that even their desire to come together as a group and tell the story of their past is based on their strong ties to the Air Force. Even today, the Air Force continues to offer a warm, supportive setting for this research project known as From Rebirth to the Skies. Their silence was a brick wall with intentional cracks. Their avoidance of discussion of their past and new identities they built for themselves were a major factor in their success. Yet, the certain situations they were flooded by the memories and thoughts of their past. Despite the relatively disadvantaged starting point they had because of the circumstances of their childhood, they had a strong ambition to succeed. The glaring contrast between their difficult childhood and their notable success as commanders in the Air Force can be explained by following factors. Their pride in playing a role in building and defending the State of Israel. The fact that the Air Force was their home and their family enlarged their willingness to make a contribution and promote their successful integration in the Air Force and in the Israeli society. Their personal stories and the national stories are intertwined, representing the Holocaust and the national individual revival of all interviewees. The individual stories came together to create a complex description of the phenomenon. This life story teaches us about personal and collective memory, the dynamic of loss, wandering, return, and rehabilitation. In fact, their stories is a summary of some of the most important chapters in the Jewish history. The heritage of Holocaust survivors, Aircrew member, is an oral history that offers knowledge and insight to anyone interested in understanding their unique contribution to the Air Force and to the rebirth of the Jewish people in the State of Israel. I hope this study will become an important source of information to anyone interested in learning more about this topic. Thank you very much.